You want an application engineer, you want a design engineer, you want a technician on site, whichever category you pick. We have an army and they're global, and we could dispatch them to any site, any location on the planet.
How much more data is being created, right, by all these applications? No matter the transport method, right? How much more data is being created?
So Ken, now we talked about, ABC, kind of how we got together, how we kind of have won in the marketplace, and how, we've been managing, the ecosystem. But one of the things I think is important to discuss out there is, the deployment. And I think we'll save this for another episode where we're going to talk about, supply chain, things of that nature. I'd like to do a deeper dive, so we'll do a follow-up podcast with that. But let's talk about, how we got there and what that means, from the beginning. And one thing Corning always did, and one of the things that we've always done, is work closely with Corning and the engineering team. There was a day that there was nothing called voice of customer. I remember in the early days, the engineers would go in a room and they would design something and bring it out and thought it was the greatest thing since night baseball, and they thought the world was going to go great. And then they made something in a vacuum and people said, I'm not using that.
Right.
And it was so true. So one of the things was that what products really apply, what really makes sense. And then we started working with engineering and Corning and say, no, you really have to get voice of customer. And that's when we really started going out to the market, and we would have people come in from Corning and from all over the world and come run around in New York City with us and see and listen to these customers. And I think the one thing that they really talked about, which we weren't really aware of at the time, is that when you're building, let's take a simple data center in an enterprise in New York City or New Jersey, how many things? They had a 27 list punch list, right? They have, the building, they have, facilities, they had all this other stuff going on, and they didn't, and one thing we learned is that trades were in other trades' way. So if we had some of those jobs, we have, 20 IBW electricians working in an aisle in a data center terminating fiber. And they had to set up the tables and the chairs and the clean room. And while that was happening in those rows, nothing else could happen because nobody else could get in there to do it. And that was the impotence for people when they were meeting a Gantt chart or construction. How do I hit those milestones? And one of the things that we really did is started looking at, one of the first things was the Unicam, a connector now that took, 2 minutes to put on versus 30 minutes to glue and polish. And that was one of the first things that we really innovated in the marketplace. And New York City really became a Unicam, town, especially because, again, working with the ecosystem. We went to the IBW. We said, we'll teach them how to do this. We'll teach the fiber optic courses. And they really embraced it. But then we started getting into preterm fiber, right? Or it's already terminated. Oh, this way we just lay it in and drop it in and plug it in. And, Corning and us along with them have always been the innovators to support and sell that to market. So we've always been the leader in how do we deploy that faster. And one of the things that Corning did when we made our Edge solution, which is a total preterm solution for the data center, and now even for the backbone infrastructure, moving to these higher speeds, they designed their products to be as tubeless as possible. So everything's snap and click. You didn't have to go looking for your scissors, you're looking for electrical tape, looking for Velcro. Everything was built into the solution, and when you got it, it was deployed so much faster. And we kind of took that theme across all things, Corning, Eaton, and now we'll look at the Airspan piece too. But to minimize our impact, to get in and out of the way of the other trays to build the rest of the stuff that had to be built. And Ken, you were a big part of that too. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting too. It's timely that the Unicam just celebrated its 30th birthday.
Yes.
Right. But I would say, similar to what you mentioned on the Corning side with doing the voice of customer or voice of technology and understanding things from that perspective. And again, over the last 5+ years, we've been able to do the same thing on the Eaton side. And, we've got products that are being launched from Eaton, this year and got launched last year. And in large part, they're because of, the customers that those groups have sat down with in our territory and relayed to them, as far as what they would like to see and what would make their lives easier and how could they quickly deploy. Um,
Right. And not only speeds
yeah,
to deploy, but the reliability of it working the first time and not failing.
exactly, and I think it just one good example of that is where we've had a ton of success is the UPDU, which is Eaton's chassis, where you can have the same chassis, switch out the cord, right? But it's all about that migration path. So just as on the Corning side and on the fiber side, right, we help them try to deploy an infrastructure that can go from 1 gig to 10 gig to 40 gig and eventually to 800 gig, right? The same infrastructure that can go into place, right? So similar on the Eaton side, how do we help the customer set up a standard? They use the same chassis, and if they need to go from 30 to 50 to 60 amp, they'll be able to do that as well, right? So I think it's all about
Yeah.
flexibility and creating that value for them.
Or piggybacking on the Unicam success story, one of the things that happened was that the Unicam was a good connector, but it was a manual install. It was a mechanical splice, and a lot of people were very hesitant to use a mechanical splice. Or if the installer didn't do it exactly correct, they could have issues down the road where the signal could be lost, etc. Even though it was a strong connector at the time, people really wanted to move on to a splice on, right? They were pigtail splicing. They felt that that was more permanent and more longer lasting. And then we seen the whole market switch. Now we're selling splice line connectors. So we do move. Sometimes it doesn't always have to be a technical issue that needs to be argued. If people just don't trust it,
Yeah.
even though it should be, don't fight that battle, give them what they want, and we develop those connectors. And now when you talk about 800 gig, we're already at 1.6 terabits in the standards. The MTP connector has been a connector, and there's new connectors coming out in the market. And, we were able to make splice-on connectors for those as well. So things happen in the field. So now we have a way to do a quick repair to get in and out. We can have the training people teach the people how to do that so that they can maintain their own facility. And, it's great to have it all installed, but I always like letting people know the world we live in, because so many times I talk to people and take a data center, tier one data center, 99.69s, meaning no downtime. There's only, a 0.0001 chance of something failing. And I tell people, well, we don't live in that world. When we look at power and fiber, we need 100% twice A and B packs redundant uplink. So we can't afford the 0.0001. So we live in the world where we give a 25-year warranty and application guarantee to hit the speeds they need. That'll work. And like you had mentioned, Kenny, now that they know they can make that investment the first time and scale with that and maintain their investment as they go along. Prior to this, people were ripping it out. That they say the electronics in the data center get upgraded now in 3 to 4 years totally in the cycle. So if somebody's data center is a 20-year data center, they could churn their electronics 4 to 5, 6 times within that time period. They used to rip and replace the infrastructure out in the beginning days, but now they make the investment. It stays static, it works, and we have adds and changes and repairs along the way. But we're very, very keen on that as well. And I think that's why they come back to seconds for us too, because it's not just day one. We live with them and support it, for the duration. And that's proven just in the longevity of how long we've been doing this. So I think they feel like we're around, we're not going anywhere. So that's been a big part of supporting that ecosystem. So really good stuff. Anything else you could think about in the deployment of our playbook for, building these large projects?
Again, I think just bringing to bear the resources that we have, right? And having them involved, be an integral part of those conversations. And, because even from our team, right? I mean, I would, we're all, I would say, considered subject matter experts, but there's always a subject matter expert that knows more than you, right? And I think that, bringing in those resources and having them as part of the conversation, customers view them as part of our team, right? And have dealt with those same resources on multiple projects, right? So there's a comfort level that not
Yeah,
only do they have our team, but our extended team, this,
yeah,
the engineering folks,
yeah.
all the
That's a good
companies.
point you bring up. And I want to expand on that a little bit because, one of the areas that as a manufacturer rep firm, obviously we have a defined territory in the New York metro marketplace, but because it's such a heavy concentration of consultants and global accounts, we also manage and work on global accounts. And the thing with Eaton and Corning that I tell our customers is that depends on what you want. You want an application engineer, you want a design engineer, you want a technician on site, whichever category you pick. We have an army and they're global and we could dispatch them to any site, any location on the planet. And I think that's a big advantage that we have, where most manufacturers reps don't. They don't really have that reach to help a customer across the board. And you and I have worked long and hard to do that. When we first took on Eaton, they didn't have a global infrastructure to support this. It's still work in progress, but working with them, we've come a long way to be able to do the same as Corning and dispatch somebody on a site. So if we build something, I mean, I can't tell you, we built a data center, portfolio with one customer, and they had a big problem, in APAC. And they didn't know what to do. They thought they were left, way out somewhere, and how do we get support? And they couldn't believe that we could just call up somebody, have them be contacted, and have somebody on site at a specific location to help them through or analyze a product or whatever it is that they may need. So I think that's one of the other things that really works with, as we talked about the blueprint, the companies in which we represent, and the global reach to help these people.
Yeah, I think, again, to expand on that a little bit too, is again, with some of the customers that we deal with that are global in nature, is helping them. How do they create a standard? So if they walk into a data center or an office building, in New York or London or Singapore, it looks the same, right? And it's a limited,
Correct.
uh, limited SKUs to help them do that. I think that again, that's all part of design philosophy and how we
Yeah,
help
and that's a
streamline
good
the
point you
process.
bring out is the minimizing of SKUs, right? I mean, it used to be that you got 37 items to build a fiber optic infrastructure or data center. Now we look at the edge solution and, it's 6 items and you could build it, right? Just
Yeah,
pick the size and color you want and just order it up and put it all together and click.
yeah. I mean, similar in the office space too, right? Right, trying to limit those parts and pieces as well.
Yeah.
So
So I think that's a good wrap up for, that portion of our conversation, on this episode. And, we'll look forward to the next ones, which we will cover, fiber deep and some of the technologies of what's happening today in the office space and the enterprise environments, as far as outside of the data center, what's going on outside of the data center.
we're
Um,
excited to have the first one in the books and looking forward to providing more content and more insight into the fiber and the power and the cellular world moving forward.
well, we got our first one under our belt, and hopefully, again, our objective is really to have something where people can get something out of this kind of an introduction to let them know who we are and how we work and how we can get involved. The next part is going to be, there's just more of some of the things that are coming out and changes and things that we could look forward to. All right, so good stuff, Kenny. The only problem is I don't think New England's going to make it though.
Okay, we'll see. I got my I got my Patriots gear ready if we go to North Carolina.
We can.
Yep.
All right, so we'll pause here and then do that edit right here for Gabriel, and then we'll roll right into um, this whole long reach thing.
Yeah, sounds good. Good, right?
All right, here we are on our second podcast. Kenny, welcome back. Enjoyed our first one. Today we're going to talk about something which I think is kind of incredible, and it's a continuing learning process. It's like, continual improvement process. But I had gone to a seminar. We had a trade show in New York City, and then we had our holiday party, and then I went to a seminar the next morning, which was held by Commercial Observer, and they had a great meeting with all of the real estate developers. So we're talking about all the big names, like Related and Brookfield and AECOM Tishman and
Sure.
and
Bernardo.
all the big guns. And
Yep.
I'll give a side mention to Kenny because he was probably the first one on our team to sell what we're going to call a kind of different technology and deal with the developers. And you were able to work with Related and got some of these kind of solutions sold into Hudson Yards, which was 25 million square foot build out. But since then, obviously, we went through COVID, we went through work at home, the city kind of disappeared, the office market died. We had to pivot it to other areas that we had to concentrate on to make up for the revenue loss that we're now having with our products not selling into the office space. But the thing that I got out of the meeting when I went there was that, which I was astounded by. I knew it was coming back, but it looks like New York City is not only fully back, but their Class A space right now is the highest demand space, of all cities everywhere, on the planet. And one of the things that's really driving this, I would say, excitement, and obviously they're forcing people back to work, but not just forcing them to come back and go through the mundane, go into the office, check in, check out, go walk outside and get a deli sandwich, and then come back. They are building their facilities now to be all contained within, meaning all the amenities that you could imagine in a building that never happened before. Penn Station was one of the first ones to do it. I forget which building was that, Penn Plaza 1 or 2, Kenny? I can't remember.
One Penn.
One Penn Plaza, where they actually took out revenue operating floors for lease and knocked 3 floors up in their lobby and just made a huge lobby with all amenities. You have, a gathering meeting room. You have an audio visual room. You have a restaurant and a bar. You have a little coffee bar. You have seating areas. And they were actually saying that people aren't going home, that they're staying, meaning they come to work early, they hang out after work, they congregate, they might have a cocktail afterwards, they might go to a meeting room just to pick up on something and get along with colleagues and discuss things. And one of the marquee things that came up in the meeting, which I was astounded by, was that they would just keep raving about 270 Park Avenue with JPMC's new corporate headquarters. And I always like telling people that we've been around so long that it's the third time we've rewired that same address.
Mm-hmm.
Twice it was, Chemical Bank, and then it turned into Chase, and then it was acquired by J.P. Morgan Chase. So we wired those buildings twice. Now they knocked it down and built this new building. But the statement they made, which was very, very profound, I thought, was they said that this building was designed that it will be creating the most productive workforce of any facility that's ever been built. Quite a large statement. But I say all this because they're doing the same thing. They want all these amenities, and we have security and AV and Wi-Fi and wireless, and we need all these things to happen. And one of the things that I really want to drive right here, which I think is the major point, because this is something where practice makes permanent. It doesn't, make perfect, where even to this day, there are consulting firms out there and buildings being built, and they're still using the same boilerplate for infrastructure support in a building that they did 30 years ago. They put a fiber optic backbone, they hook up all the IDFs, from the IDFs out to the areas, they run copper all over the place. And I'm always getting stymied because I'm thinking it's so inefficient, it's so power hungry, it's riddled with all kinds of issues with azimuths and changes. The copper creates all kind of noise for other systems. There's so many other things that are happening underneath the blanket there that they just keep patching it. So we're going to talk today about what we call fiber deep. And one of the things that I like to say right up front, could you imagine this? You could build a building today, like Corning did with its Corning Optical Communications Division's new headquarters in Charlotte. There's one NDF and no IDFs. Zero. I don't need to put power in them. I don't need to cool them. I don't need to regulate them. I don't need UPSs to support them. I get the real estate back in the building to use for the square footage for the real estate, for other amenities. I don't need all that. And this is going to be done with taking from the MDF and running a fiber cable with low voltage power copper conductors in it, and bringing that to the area in which I want to support all these technologies. I have sound masking. I have, um, you know, monitors in my conference rooms. I have the display outside the conference room to say who's in it and what's the time and what's the schedule.
Wi-Fi, intelligent
I got
window.
Wi-Fi. I
Yeah.
got all these things, and they're all run on an Ethernet protocol. A lot of this is Cisco gear. There's nothing new here. We just run that out further, and then we do a short reach to get all these technologies within that area. And guess what? We all know that that area could be changed 3 years from now, 4 years from now. How many times you build a house and put addition on it and say, well, I want that room to be this now, not that. And in an office building, I could literally take my main end piece of the fiber copper run. So the copper's powering the unit. The fiber is making it have the unlimited bandwidth that it needs forever to scale. I can run so much stuff off of that. And then I could just take that unit, roll it up, put it away, redo the whole area, roll it back out, reconnect everything, and bam, you're up and running. And there's a lot of things that happen. 30% less installation costs up front. I don't know what the power consideration is. We've done some analytics, but imagine all the power that, and not only just the power to power the units in the IDF, but the power to power the cooling and the UPSs and everything. And not only that, but put all this equipment in the closet and worry about all the heat, and these go away. They get eliminated. So the ROI is very quick, right up front, and the savings on day two just continue to happen. Less power, less use, more bandwidth, more accessibility to add-on features. Imagine somebody coming up with a new technology that's deployable out in the area that I might want. Maybe it's going to do, smoke sensing, or count the molecules in the air for clean air, so we don't get the disease in the air. I'm just going to take it, plug it in, right there. It's up and running. I don't have to run. I don't have to call somebody up and say, oh, by the way, I need 14 more runs. Could you get from the IDF to here? And by the way, can you do it at night? Because, I can't disrupt the workers. And how many times we see that? So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer, but I really want to get it out to the market and try to change the minds out there that they really should be looking at this, and it's not being looked at as serious as it should be. But if you're going to build these environments like JPMC and either One Penn Plaza, I guarantee you they had to bring fiber out to all those areas to deploy this technology.
Yeah, and I think a couple really great points. In that JPMC building, in One Penn Plaza, they brought in people to concentrate on those technologies, right? And the experience, right? So, Corning had a lot of success initially in stadiums and has done many, many stadiums, football stadiums, hockey arenas, right? So you think about it's really about the user experience, right? In those facilities. So in the stadiums, they want people to have a great experience, right? You look at the traffic in for a football game, or everybody's on their phone consuming, data in different schools, right? So kind of not move from, right? Because there's still obviously every stadium that gets built, Corning's probably involved in most of them, right? And then hospitality. So you think about when you go to a hotel, what do you want, right? You want to be able to have connectivity. You want to be able to, check into your room with your phone or whatever, right? All that's enabled through all these different technologies, right? So now, you kind of say, okay, people are going back to work. You look at, again, there's many other buildings in the city that are going through the same thing, right? And I think again, like you said, one of the reasons that they are staying at work, right, is because of some of that, right? So it's shifted from the stadiums. Now it added hospitality, now added the tenant experience, right? And it's just a natural progression. I think, I say this a lot. I think that, depending upon, New York tends to be cutting edge at the forefront, from a data center market, the customers here, and certainly, elsewhere now, right? But the adoption by the customers here to be able to deploy for, again, those migrations to 800 gig, 1.6 terabyte, right?
No,
Always very quick to happen. But, this has been a little bit of a longer, attrition, right? We've knocked down some great projects, but, there's still so much more out there to educate the consulting firms. And if you look at that, what they've done as well, right? So whether you look at some of the large engineering firms, they've developed these intelligent building teams. There's
no.
organizations now focused just on this type of stuff, right? Just trying to
Workspace technology, correct?
exactly these philosophies. So again, it's been a war of attrition. I think we would be further along, but the pandemic definitely slowed this down from a technology perspective. And now that everybody's calling people back into the offices, 4 days a week, probably at a minimum, we will see more of an uptick here. There's definitely been more of an appetite for people to embrace it. And listen, quite honestly, as the engineering firms bring on younger people as well, I mean, they want that experience, right? They're pushing that, they're living that, right? So I think that's having an impact.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. Well, I'm thinking of two things in case in point. One of them is, the casino that Corning did in Vegas, and it was, I think, like 4,200 rooms or something like that. And they used this fiber deep technology, and, the accounting is there as far as what they were able to increase the client experience on the facility for all those things that you had just mentioned. Anywhere in their facility, they have access to all this. And, that was a huge project, and it was a huge savings for them. Not only did it save them money, time, and power, it's bring the experience and the business even uplifted that as far as revenue is concerned.
Yeah.
So the casinos are really a place where you're in New York City. They've approved 3 of them. This definitely should go this way. If you're listening out there, call us. But I read a little article which I was surprised. We travel, we stay in hotel rooms. I'm a Bonvoy, member. I'm a Hilton member. But Hilton was interesting because I read a little article about Hilton, but there was, I want to say, a private equity person. He was a young person. I want to say maybe 28 to 32 years old, somewhere like that. And he had this idea to, go after Hilton, and because they had sold that out. The Hilton family, I believe, sold it off. And they looked at that. And one of the things they did to turn it around, they thought it was impossible. It was going to be an albatross, and you can't turn this ship around. And they're having all kinds of issues. And his whole thing was increase the experience through technology. And I love Hilton now because I don't even, you know what? I thought I would always want to deal with a person, But when it comes to a hotel room, I want to come in when I want. I don't want to have to stop at the front desk. I
Sure.
mean, I unless there's a cookie there, or something like that, I'll take it. But for me to be able to book a room, have a digital key, not see anything, go in and out of my room when I want to, have all the amenities that work with when I come on. It says, hello, Ed O'Brien, the TV's on, the lights are on. I could, it did turn around the company and became one of the biggest wins in private equity. If you want to, read about it. So interesting though, right? And that's all done with the technology we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way I always explain it is, we don't make the endpoint devices, right? We're providing the nervous system to allow those devices to communicate, right? And if we can do that in a manner to, again, enable more and more technologies, like you said, things that don't even exist today, right? But as long as it's IP addressable and it needs power, the system's in place to do it. So I think
Right.
that is, again, with New York, being back, I'll say, I think that's one of the things. Data center business is not going away. Clearly, that's going to grow. But I'd say that this is one of the things that I'm most excited about moving forward, and to continue to enable these systems to deploy the
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just had a client conversation with a very large, global company. And one of the issues that they were having is they have something like 41 warehouses where they store their stuff and things are coming in and out of it and all kinds of things are happening, but they're just huge 500,000 square foot warehouses. And they put all these little boxes on the wall, almost like mini IDFs, and they put the switches in there and then they run the copper to everything in the facility. And then machines, equipment, whatever's going on in there, and they're having a lot of issues. And now they have to upgrade. And in their upgrade, their reaches are now not working on copper.
Mhm.
Now there's a new copper product that came out. I forgot what it's called, Game Changer or something like that. Where it gets them to 200 meters versus 100 meters. And what's interesting about this is that they know there's an issue. They know that they can't get 200 meters, at 10 gig. They can get 200 meters at 10 meg, but if they go over 10 gig, they already know they're limiting 10 gig at 200 meters. And if you look at the charts and all that, it tails off, at like, 180 feet. But if I go 40 gig or if I go 100 gig and I have to up that anytime, again, the scalability, now it doesn't work. So now they know, well, I could probably get 150 meters. And all this is going on. They're trying to figure out, now you have to figure out the distance, what cable, what thing, without any. And again, to my point, practice makes permanent, because we said, no, we could just put 2 fiber deeps right in the center and connect everything within the 100 meters. But there's an uptick cost to do that. They're on a tight budget. It's less money to put this game changer cable in on the runs that they need it. And after we're all done, even our experts say, well, it's really not going to work the way they thought it's going to work, because they're going to get interference. They're going to get noise. It's going to have its own electromagnetic shields. And even if you shield the cable, it's still going to get, in that environment. One thing someone told me when we look at copper cable, physicals equal electricals. And I'm going to say this loud and clear. Fiber is more robust than copper. All I got to do is pinch a copper and it's not going to give the same electricals. And the fiber is so robust now. Corning came out with this clear curve fiber that you almost have to take it and pinch it and break it for it not to work. And it's with Kevlar, and it's got the pull tension, it's got the crush tension. It's probably 100 times more stable than copper. So I get built environment today.
People generally think the opposite, right? They generally think that, you can't lay copper on top of fiber in a tray. It's really the other way around.
Yeah, they're very,
Yep.
well, they still have the glass mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have the glass mentality, and I guess one of the things to point up is that, these things right here, This is the glass provided by Corning. It's most indestructible glass. That's why they're on the phones.
Yeah. Gorilla
Because
Glass.
they survive. And, Corning is a glass company, so they made it pretty tough these days. So, it can take a licking, but it can keep on ticking.
I bet you there's a lot of people listening to this now that don't understand where that came from, right?
They don't know that one, right?
Right. I remember one of the first pictures that we saw after, I guess it was when Corning helped Verizon develop the FiOS system, right? And part of it was the use of the clear curve glass, right? Seeing the picture of the electrician that came in that needed a temporary light, so he took one of the fiber runs and tied it in a knot and hung the light. Yeah, and the owner came in and freaked out, but they tested all the fiber.
Still working.
Worked. Yeah, the signal never went down. So,
but it is true, we talk about the tenant experience, and I mentioned the Hilton, and it's just a positive experience all around to deploy these kind of solutions, and the scalability of it is just, there is no end to the availability of bandwidth that you would have and the power that you would have. And again, everything's low voltage. So I don't need electricians. I don't need the high pay. I don't need the high hourly rates. I know our installers don't like that, but this is the world they live in. Over time, things change. And I'm liking the new world we're going to go into, like Penn Station and like JPMC. I think they've got it right. I just hope that some people out there can really embrace this, or at least learn and understand it, or trial it. I mean, just try it. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I that's a great point, because whenever we've done that, I think we've been successful, right? We can just talk somebody into taking it into a lab. I know Corning's done that themselves, right? But if we can convince somebody to just take a look at it, right?
Yeah, especially end
That's
users,
generally what gets us over the hump.
especially in the institutions, especially financial institutions, right? They all have technology labs. They all try stuff, right? That's something that maybe we could try to get out there in the market and kind of give a starter kit.
We have
a media converter and a Actify cable, and have them see how that works.
Yeah, so I think about another interesting part of it, right? Even just you think about what we're talking about and the applications that this can help support. Again, from our perspective, it's interesting because it does go back to how much more data is being created, right, by all these applications, no matter the transport method, right? How much more data is being created? So again, from an ABC perspective, that's interesting to us, and obviously something that we pursue, because that data has to reside somewhere, right? So now we get into a situation where it helps the data center part of the business grow, because it has to sit somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, and maybe that's a good closing statement, is that, what I'm really in awe about, and with AI, right, and these GPUs, right now, the goal and holy grail of all companies and all the scalers all want every GPU to be connected to every GPU, regardless of who owns it. And if you think of that, that's just incredible. A total global GPU kind of connection, right? Network, neural network almost, if you could think of it like that. So to your point, if I'm sitting here and I have to produce something, I probably want, a fiber feed to my house and my office and my space, because like you said, how much data are we going to be pulling? I don't know, but it's going to go, if I go to a search and it's an AI search, it's going to go look at everything, and then it's going to find what I want and bring it back to me. Like, like GPT chat, right?
Yeah.
So to put in an infrastructure today in a commercial environment that is cheaper, less expensive, more scalable, longer lasting, and reduces the day two costs of operating everything. So
Reduces day two cost, increases sustainability, right? There are just all
there's sustainability is
on-
another big issue, right?
hits on all the hits on all the points, right? And again, to go back to what you were talking about, right? You know, in Corning's building specifically, you know, there have been independent studies that were done day two, you know, how much power did it save, how much cooling, and all of those things, right? So there is data that we can provide that show multiple projects and the evaluations that have been done by independent, you know, folks outside of Corning. And I mean, the argument or the collateral is there, right? It's not, you know, that somebody deploys this and that they're the first person doing it, right? It's been done many, many times.
Yeah.
So-
So it is exciting times again. And again, I think we're in a situation, like you said, that, you know, the growth and the technology is there strong for the next 5 to 10 years, no doubt. But I think we're going to see, just like you say, 30 years on the Unicam from this day forward is going to be 30 years of what we're talking about, and watch it evolve.
Yeah.
And it's going to be incredible.
It's going to be incredible. And again, you know, from an ABC perspective, I'm so excited about the additional folks that we've added to our team to allow us to, you know, service more of the market and have more of these conversations and get to more customers and just to keep evangelizing the message. So
Yeah.
exciting times, for sure. You know,
Well,
me
I
and
couldn't have said that
market-
better myself, Kenny. So I think we'll close it on that note. How's
Yeah.
that?
Perfect. All right. Well, again, looking forward to the next one, and you know, more topics to come. And I hope everybody finds all the information that we talked about useful, and would love
Yeah,
to.
we look
love
forward
hear
to
your
it. Keep
thoughts.
pushing content forward, and we're looking to bring on some guests in the future, and just continue kind of talking to the community about all these things, which is obviously something you and I don't mind talking about, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
All right, good stuff.